Welcome to the Spirit Room. This podcast is a gathering place for people in search of personal growth and life's higher meaning. I'm your host, Mike Consul. I also invite you to spend time on the Spirit Room website, where you'll find headlines about religion, spirituality, psychology, and the New Age movement. Just go to thespiritroom.org. I recently read an article that I also posted on the Spirit Room website about the biggest myth regarding meditation. And that myth is this, and I tend to agree with it depending on the type of meditation that you're doing and how advanced you are, and also what you're trying to accomplish with meditation. So obviously there's some stipulations there on my part. That myth is about meditation is that when we're in meditation, the mind is supposed to be completely silent, completely devoid of thoughts. This isn't true. In fact, it's darn near impossible to completely silence one's mind. Think instead in terms of observing your thoughts, kind of removing yourself from yourself, becoming an observer. Get outside yourself, observe your thoughts, don't attach to them, don't extend the thought, just observe it. And pay attention to what kind of thoughts or themes your mind wants to keep returning to. You can learn a lot about yourself and the sort of things that you're obsessing over, or the sort of things that really concern you, by actually paying attention to your thoughts in this way, in a very analytical and third-party fashion. So we sit and we listen to our thoughts, and if we don't attach to those thoughts, then the analogy that's been used by many people is that they kind of float past like clouds. Very fast-moving clouds, hopefully. We want them to just drift through our mind, move on, and then here comes the next thought, or two or three thoughts that we observe. And maybe after the fact we question why our mind is so preoccupied with a particular line of thinking. This is a lesson I should have learned a long time ago. When I was in college, I started meditating. I still, to this day, refer to myself as a failed meditator. I expected things from meditation that were unrealistic, that meditation couldn't deliver. Specifically, God realization. I was going to find myself completely immersed in God itself, in the divine light. That's a lot to ask of meditation, and of course, that never happened. I'm not sure if that's even really possible. But one of the reasons I got so frustrated with meditation is that I was working to try to completely silence my mind. I'd be counting breaths, or using a mantra, or listening to a particular sound. It could be a waterfall, it could be flute music. And the truth is, if you are counting your breaths 1 to 5 repeatedly, as I was doing, or using a mantra, the idea is that your thinking does cease. You're not paying any attention to thoughts. That you completely silence your mind. Really hard to do. And one of the things I found that was really curious is that when I would start meditating, I'm talking about when I'd start meditating for the first time in a long time. Say I had not been meditating for months and I decided to make another go of it. When I first started, I actually was able to quiet my mind more readily than weeks later. You would think that I would get better and better at it, but instead my mind became even more rambunctious over time. And the point that was made in the article is that the brain is a thinking machine. That's what the brain does. It thinks, and to ask it to stop thinking is to ask it to do something that is absolutely unnatural to it, that is antithetical to what the brain is all about. And even the act of saying to itself that I'm not thinking right now is actually thinking. We have to be paying enough attention to know that we're not having any thoughts. And actually that can be done. It can't be done in its entirety. The brain is actually still active and it is still thinking. So his point is well taken, that the brain is in the business of thinking, and to completely silence it is maybe not even possible. So what do we do? If I had known earlier in life to stop trying to force my mind to cease thinking completely, and instead to have simply observed my own thoughts and given myself an opportunity to analyze them after the fact at the end of the meditation, I probably would have had more luck. I also think that when you fight the mind, the actual effort of trying to silence the mind works against us. The brain pushes back, and it pushes back hard. In some ways, it just refuses to be controlled. This is the great challenge of meditation. Some people say the hardest thing that you will ever do in your life is try to get your mind to be quiet. We certainly want to have some control over our mind, because our minds can drive us crazy. We can go crazy if we get caught up in these circular thoughts that go round and round, and we keep basically chasing our tail, like a dog chasing its tail. All you do is basically spin, and you don't get anywhere. Meditation is supposed to take us out of that. It's one of the benefits of meditation, one of the objectives. So let's not think necessarily in terms of silencing the mind. Let's think in terms instead of quieting the mind. Meditation is a subject I'm going to come back to, of course, several times, because it is so integral to the spiritual pursuit. And even if you don't meditate for spiritual reasons, meditation has been shown again and again to be something that's really positive for the mental and physical health of a human being. The thing is, there are so many different ways to meditate. There's silence, there's, I mentioned mantras, counting of the breaths, staring at a candlelight, at the flame at the top of a candle. There's something called a yantra, which is basically a symbol that a person stares at and concentrates on. Think of meditation as concentration as well. If you're focused on something, whether it's breaths or a mantra or a yantra or a sound, that's a form of concentration. We're concentrating on something so that our mind isn't running amok. I can tell you that one of my favorite, I would say my favorite form of meditation that I ever learned, and I ran across in college. I was at the Changing Hands bookstore on Mill Avenue in Tempe, Arizona, while I was attending Arizona State University. I was always in that bookstore looking for good metaphysical books, good books about metaphysics is what I should say. These were actually physical books about metaphysics and spirituality and religious philosophy and so on. And Alan Watts was he's certainly one of the people who I have great admiration for. The late Alan Watts, the Zen master, I guess it's fair to call him, although his writings and thinkings were extended beyond Zen Buddhism. There was a little tiny book, I think it was just called Meditation by Alan Watts. I've never seen it since, but I absolutely remember what he taught. And by the way, you can go on YouTube and find Alan Watts videos, which are basically just, it's audio. It's not really video, it's audio of him lecturing. Very good stuff, much of it. And I do believe he talks about meditation in some of those videos as well. But this particular book, what he taught was to simply listen to the sounds around you. You don't have to be in a really quiet place to meditate. You don't have to. But a lot of people think you need to find complete silence to meditate because you need the exterior silence to create the interior silence. This is not true. In fact, I think it can inhibit the effort to silence the mind. So Alan Watts' method, at least in this particular book, and of course he has, like anybody else, he espoused several different methods. Pick a method that works for you, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and what agrees with your sensibilities. But to me, this particular method where you sit in a place and you just listen to the sounds around you and you don't attach to them, very much like I was just talking about thoughts and not attaching to thoughts. So you hear sounds around you. It might be traffic. It might be a jet flying overhead. It might be some trickling water. It might be a child crying. This is great for the outdoors, outdoor meditation in a fairly quiet place with a variety of sounds around you. And you don't attach to the sound. You listen to them. Obviously, you recognize the sounds, but try not to think in terms of, well, that's a jet flying overhead and that's a baby crying. Just listen. Because the truth is that there's all kinds of sounds around us, and they're all expressions of this force field of energy and life that is the Supreme Being, and we don't really ever spend any time really listening and focusing on those. And listening to the orchestra that is playing all around us. And they're not always pleasant sounds. Not all of the sounds that surround us are pleasant, especially when you get into the man-made sounds and mechanical sounds and so on. And you could do this same thing with a primary sound. For instance, you could be next to a babbling brook, and that's the primary sound, but you still will hear a bird chirping. Or some leaves in the tree clattering in the wind. I find it to be a really pleasant way to meditate, and it's something that connects us to all that is around us. It creates a greater level of connectedness to all the sounds and activities that maybe are happening right outside our window, right outside our door, right in the middle of our communities. So, I don't know, are you even one of those people who are inclined to meditate? One of the hardest things to do with meditation is to find the time. I know that, I'll give you another example of my own experience that was difficult, is a lot of times people who espouse or promote meditation will say, get up in the morning and do it for 20 minutes, and then before going to bed, do it for 20 minutes. I always found that to be a problem, because in the morning, if I would meditate upon rising, I would want to fall asleep again. And at the end of the day before bed, I'd want to fall asleep and go to sleep. It would be the end of probably a long day. And And concentrating was difficult. Trying to meditate just was a sleep inducer, which for a lot of people that's a great thing because a lot of people have trouble sleeping. And if you have trouble sleeping, meditation can be a terrific way to actually promote sleep, to enter that land of nod. The good thing about first thing in the morning and last thing at night is that if you're doing it first thing in the morning, nothing gets in the way during the day. And the same for the last thing in the evening. This is assuming, again, that you've got the energy level to actually pull that off. So one of the biggest obstacles is just finding the time to meditate and really being committed to it. But I think you'll find that one of the most pleasant ways to do it is to not attach to thoughts, listen to the sounds around you, observe your thoughts, find a method of meditation that works for you. There's no end to the types of meditation. And one of these days soon, I want to talk about kinetic meditation. And by kinetic meditation, some people might think moving. There is such a thing as moving meditation, where you're actually walking and concentrating on your footsteps, let's say. And there's other forms of moving meditation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about mentally kinetic meditation. That's a subject I'll talk about in the future. It's actually one that my brother got me onto because he started doing this and was having some good results, and I thought, wow, that really works for my mind, because my mind likes to work on things. Instead of trying to sideline the mind, you're actually engaging the mind, but you're engaging it in a manner that is focused on particular things that are of a spiritual orientation. So I've kind of gone all over the map in this podcast, kind of like what the mind does when we try to meditate. It's kind of scattered and going from one thing to another, and not necessarily in a logical order, not necessarily connected. There you have it, the mind at work. That's it for this episode. Godspeed.